You're leaving money on the table right now. While others scream for attention, someone else is quietly closing deals. What if the loudest person rarely wins? The paradox is this: silence built more fortunes than noise ever will. Why do introverts control 40% of C-suites, but 70% stay invisible? Most millionaires you've never heard of chose it that way. Your noise is their competitive advantage. They move while you perform. What if everything you believed about success was backwards? This book reveals what they won't say out loud. Let me tell you about two people I met in the same month. The first walked into a conference ballroom wearing a custom suit, handed out business cards like a dealer at a casino, and made sure everyone knew about his recent funding round. He spoke at volume. He name-dropped. He collected contacts like trophies. The second person sat in the back during the panel discussion, asked one question, and left before the networking session. I only learned later that he'd sold his third company for 8 figures and was already building his fourth. The loud one is still posting about his journey on social media. The quiet one retired at 42. This isn't a story about introversion versus extroversion. It's about something deeper, something the wealth-building industrial complex doesn't want you to understand, because there's no subscription model for silence. There's no certification program for strategic invisibility. You can't monetize the pause, but you can use it to build everything. Most of what you've been taught about making money is theatrical instruction. Look successful and success will follow. Build your personal brand. Stay visible. Post daily. Network constantly. Hustle harder. Make noise so opportunity can find you. And while you're busy performing this exhausting routine, someone else is in a quiet room making decisions that will change their life forever. The calm millionaire understands what the attention economy really costs. Not money, clarity. Every notification is a small theft. Every unnecessary meeting is a missed opportunity for deep work. Every minute spent broadcasting is a minute not spent building. The math is simple but brutal. If you spend 4 hours daily on visibility and someone else spends those same 4 hours on systems that generate wealth while they sleep, who wins over 10 years? They do. By a margin so wide you can't see them anymore. This book is your extraction plan from the noise. It's not about working harder or wanting it more. Those are the old mantras, the ones that left you exhausted and somehow still behind. This is about working differently, quietly, strategically, with the kind of patience that looks like inaction to people who mistake motion for progress. We're going to dismantle everything you think you know about wealth building and replace it with something older, something proven, something the most successful people already practice but rarely discuss, because talking about it would be noisy. And noise is exactly what we're leaving behind. So find a place where you can focus. Turn off your notifications. Not for a few minutes, for the next several hours. This is going to require your full attention, not because the concepts are complicated, but because they're so simple that your mind will want to reject them. Your conditioning will fight back. The part of you that's been trained to perform will panic at the silence. Let it panic. We're about to rebuild everything. The invisible millionaire principle starts with a question nobody wants to ask. If wealth is the goal, why would you advertise that you're building it? Every public declaration is an invitation for distraction, competition, and people who want to extract value from your journey. The most efficient path between intention and outcome is invisible to everyone except you. Think about the wealthiest person you know personally. Not a celebrity, not someone you follow online. Someone in your actual life who has significant financial freedom. How often do they talk about it? How many people know the real numbers? If they're truly wealthy, the answer is almost never and almost no one. This isn't secrecy for its own sake. It's strategic energy conservation. Every time you announce a goal, your brain gets a small dopamine hit as if you've already achieved it. This is scientifically documented. The announcement satisfies the reward center that should only fire upon completion. So you get the emotional payoff without doing the work, which makes the actual work less compelling. Meanwhile, you've also invited opinions, skepticism, and the exhausting task of managing other people's perceptions of your progress. The invisible millionaire avoids all of this by simply not speaking. They set the goal in private. They work toward it in private. They achieve it in private. And then they move to the next goal while others are still arguing on social media about whether the first goal was even possible. This creates a compounding advantage that most people never calculate. Imagine two people with identical skills, resources, and opportunities. One documents their journey publicly. The other works in silence. The public person spends energy on content creation, reputation management, responding to feedback, and dealing with the psychological weight of an audience. The silent person spends that same energy on iteration, learning, system building, and execution. After 1 year, there's a gap. After 5 years, they're in different universes. But we've been conditioned to believe the opposite. We've been told that visibility equals credibility, that if you're not being seen, then you're not making progress. This is marketplace logic designed to benefit platforms, not builders. Platforms need your content. They need your engagement. They need you visible and active because that's their business model. Your wealth is not their business model. Your peace of mind is not their business model. Your strategic advantage through silence is the opposite of their business model. So they've convinced you that the person posting about their morning routine is ahead of the person actually optimizing their morning routine. That the person sharing their wins is more successful than the person accumulating wins without announcement. That the networker with 1,000 connections is more powerful than the strategist with 5 deep relationships. All of this is backwards. The invisible millionaire knows something crucial about attention. It's the most valuable resource you have, and it's under constant assault. Not just your attention toward your goals, but everyone else's attention toward you. When people don't know what you're building, they can't form opinions about it. They can't offer unsolicited advice. They can't project their limitations onto your vision. They can't ask you for premature explanations or demand that you justify your timeline. You remain free to build without the friction of other people's psychology. This freedom is worth more than most people realize. Imagine trying to build something significant while constantly explaining it to people who don't understand it yet. Every explanation requires translating your vision into language that makes sense to someone who isn't living inside it. Every translation slightly distorts the original. Every distortion requires you to either accept the degraded version or spend more energy clarifying. Meanwhile, the thing itself isn't being built. You're managing perception instead of creating reality. Now imagine the alternative. You see the opportunity, you understand the mechanics, you have the plan, and you simply execute without commentary. When people ask what you're working on, you give them the simplest possible answer and redirect the conversation. Not because you're being secretive for drama, but because their understanding is not required for your success. In fact, their understanding might slow you down. This is difficult at first because we're social creatures who want validation. We want people to know we're making smart decisions. We want the encouragement that comes from sharing our plans. We want witnesses to our effort. All of these wants are real, but none of them build wealth. They build social comfort, which is a different thing entirely. The invisible millionaire chooses wealth over comfort, knowing that the wealth will eventually provide a different kind of comfort anyway. The kind that doesn't require anyone else's approval. Let me be specific about what this looks like in practice. You're building a business. The visible approach is to announce the business, share the journey, post about the challenges, celebrate the small wins publicly, and build an audience around your story. This feels productive because engagement is a form of feedback. People comment, people encourage, people watch. The invisible approach is to tell almost no one. Build the business until it's generating real revenue, and only reveal it when the results speak louder than any announcement could. Which approach do you think leads to faster execution? Which one has fewer emotional highs and lows? Which one protects you from comparison, from people who want to copy your idea before you've established your advantage, from the mental overhead of managing a public narrative? The answer is obvious, but it requires you to give up something that feels good in exchange for something that works better. The same principle applies to investments, to career moves, to relationship decisions, to everything that matters. The less you broadcast, the more energy you have for the actual work. The less you explain, the less you're constrained by other people's comprehension. The less visible you are, the more freedom you have to pivot, to experiment, to fail privately, and learn without an audience watching. This doesn't mean becoming a recluse or pretending you don't exist. It means being intentional about what you make visible and what you protect. Some things benefit from visibility. A product launch benefits from visibility. A completed achievement can benefit from selective sharing. But the process? The strategy? The doubt and iteration and failures and late-night recalculations? Those are yours alone. Guard them accordingly. The invisible millionaire principle is ultimately about understanding that wealth is built in private and demonstrated in public, never the other way around. When you reverse this, when you demonstrate in public hoping it will lead to building in private, you trap yourself in performance. Performance is exhausting. Building is energizing. One drains you. One compounds. So the first decision you need to make is simple. Are you going to build wealth or perform wealth building? Because you don't have the energy for both, and only one of them actually works. The calm millionaire already made this choice. They chose silence. They chose invisibility. They chose the path that nobody celebrates until it's too late to copy. Now we need to talk about what's stealing your capacity to make the decisions that actually matter. Your attention economy is broken, and the cost is showing up in your bank account, whether you realize it or not. Every successful person I've studied has some version of the same insight. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your outcomes, and the quality of your decisions is directly tied to the quality of your attention. Most people are trying to build wealth with fragmented attention. They're making financial decisions between notifications. They're evaluating opportunities while half watching a screen. They're planning their future during stolen moments between obligations. This is like trying to perform surgery with someone shouting in your ear. Technically possible, but the error rate goes up significantly. The noise problem isn't just external. It's not just the notifications and meetings and demands. It's internal too. It's the mental loops you run about things that don't matter. It's the worry about optics. It's the constant recalculation of where you stand relative to others. It's the simulation of conversations you're never going to have. All of this is noise, and it's filling the space where strategic thinking should live. Here's what most people don't realize. Your brain has a limited budget for high-quality decisions each day. Some research suggests it's as few as 3 to 5 genuinely important decisions before your decision-making quality starts to degrade. This is why successful people protect their mornings, why they automate trivial choices, why they build systems that reduce the number of decisions they have to make consciously. They understand the budget exists, so they spend it carefully. But if your attention is scattered across 40 inputs before you even start your workday, you've already spent the budget on noise. You've made dozens of micro-decisions about notifications, about responding to messages, about prioritizing interruptions. By the time you sit down to think about something that actually matters, your decision-making capacity is already compromised, and you wonder why you're not making progress. The calm millionaire approaches this differently. They treat their attention like a non-renewable resource, because within each day, it essentially is. Once you've spent it, you can't get it back until tomorrow, so they build barriers around it. They create conditions where noise can't reach them during the hours that matter most. They ruthlessly eliminate inputs that don't serve the outcome they're building toward. This sounds simple until you try it. Because the modern world is designed to violate these barriers. Everything wants your attention right now. Every platform has notifications. Every service has urgent updates. Every person has immediate needs. And if you try to protect your attention without a clear system, you'll fail. Not because you're weak, but because the systems designed to capture your attention are built by teams of engineers whose entire job is defeating your willpower. So you need systems that are stronger than their systems. You need defaults that protect you even when your discipline wavers. You need architecture that makes attention protection the path of least resistance instead of an act of constant willpower. Let me give you a practical framework. Start by tracking where your attention actually goes for one full week, not where you think it goes. Where it actually goes. Every time you switch contexts, every time you check something, every time you respond to something, write it down. This exercise is usually horrifying because people discover they're giving hours of attention to things they don't even remember doing. Email checks that turned into 20-minute rabbit holes. Social media glances that consumed 30 minutes. Slack messages that fragmented an entire afternoon. Once you have the data, you can start making eliminations. Not optimizations, eliminations. Most people try to manage their attention better. The calm millionaire eliminates the need for management by removing inputs entirely. They don't try to check email less frequently. They restructure their work so email becomes irrelevant during creation hours. They don't try to use social media more intentionally. They delete the apps and access them once weekly from a desktop if needed at all. This feels extreme until you calculate what it's worth. If protecting your attention leads to one better decision per week, and that decision improves your outcomes by even 5%, what does that compound to over 10 years? The math isn't even close. The person protecting their attention builds exponentially more wealth than the person managing their attention, even if they have identical starting resources. But here's where most people get stuck. They understand the concept intellectually, but can't execute emotionally. Because eliminating noise feels like missing out. It feels like losing connection. It feels like falling behind. These feelings are real, but they're also lies. Your conditioning tells you to keep you trapped in patterns that don't serve you. The truth is the opposite. The more noise you eliminate, the more you see. The more inputs you remove, the clearer the signal becomes. The more you protect your attention, the more capability you have to notice opportunities others miss. This is counterintuitive, which is why most people never discover it. They stay busy processing noise and mistake the busyness for productivity. Right now, before we go any further, I want you to do something. Take a slow breath in through your nose for 4 counts. Hold it for 4 counts. Release it through your mouth for 6 counts. Do this 3 times. I'll wait. This isn't filler. This is the point. Notice how those 15 seconds created a small gap in the noise. Notice how your awareness shifted just slightly. That gap is where wealth gets built, not in the noise. In the gap. The calm millionaire lives in the gap. They've structured their entire life to create and protect these spaces where clear thinking can happen. They don't wait for clarity to arrive. They build the conditions that make clarity inevitable. And the first condition is silence. Not physical silence necessarily, though that helps, but mental silence. The absence of competing demands on their attention during the hours when decisions get made. This is why they say no to almost everything. Why they don't take most meetings. Why they're not on most platforms. Why they seem unreachable. They're not being difficult, they're being strategic. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that matters. Every fractured hour is an hour that can't compound. Every context switch is a small withdrawal from the account that funds their best decisions. Most people won't do this because the social cost feels too high. They worry about seeming rude or unavailable or not being a team player. These worries are valid in employment contexts where you don't control your time. But if you're building wealth, you must control your time. If you don't control your time, someone else controls your outcomes. It's that simple. So you need to make a choice. Do you want to be available or do you want to be wealthy? Do you want to respond quickly or do you want to build something that lasts? Do you want social comfort or do you want financial freedom? These aren't the same things. Often they're opposite things. The calm millionaire chose wealth, chose building, chose freedom. They accepted the social discomfort that comes with protecting their attention. And the discomfort was temporary. The wealth compounded. Let me tell you what this looks like in a specific situation. There's a woman I know who built a software company to 8 figures in revenue. When she started, everyone wanted her time. Potential customers wanted demos. Potential partners wanted calls. Industry people wanted coffee meetings. Advisors wanted to give input. She said yes to almost all of it in the first year because that's what you're supposed to do. Network, build relationships, stay visible. By the end of year 1, she was exhausted and the company had barely grown. Year 2, she changed everything. She stopped taking meetings unless they had a clear purpose that served her specific goals. She stopped responding to most inquiries. She stopped posting on platforms. She disappeared from industry events. People thought she'd failed or given up. Her visible activity dropped by 90%. Her actual productivity increased by 300%. Within 18 months, the company hit 7 figures in recurring revenue. The silence gave her space to build what the noise never could. When I asked her about it, she said something I'll never forget. She said the hardest part wasn't saying no to people. It was saying no to the version of herself that wanted approval. The part that wanted people to know she was working hard, making progress, being successful. That part wanted to share, wanted to update, wanted validation. She had to kill that part to make room for the part that builds. And killing it felt like loss at first, but then it felt like freedom. This is the reclamation process. You're taking back attention that's been colonized by systems that don't serve you. You're recovering energy that's been diffused across too many directions. You're consolidating your capability so it can be applied with force to the things that actually change your outcomes. This isn't a productivity hack. This is a fundamental restructuring of how you operate in the world. And it starts with one simple practice. Before you say yes to anything, before you add any input to your life, you ask one question. Does this make my highest value decisions easier or harder? If it doesn't make them easier, the answer is no. Doesn't matter how good the opportunity sounds. Doesn't matter who's asking. Doesn't matter what you'll miss. If it fragments your attention during the hours when you make decisions that compound, it costs more than it's worth. This filter alone will eliminate 80% of what's stealing your capacity. The remaining 20% is where the work lives. The hard conversations, the difficult projects, the uncertain bets, the things that require your full attention because they're worth it. When you clear everything else, you finally have the space to engage these things properly. Not between distractions, not with divided focus, but with the full force of your capability applied exactly where it matters most. That's how the calm millionaire operates. They don't manage their attention. They eliminate the need for management by removing everything that doesn't serve the outcome. They don't balance competing priorities. They delete all priorities except the one that compounds. They don't try harder. They remove the friction that made trying necessary in the first place. And then they watch as the space they've protected fills with clarity, with opportunity, with the kind of thinking that only happens in silence. So here's your next step. Look at your calendar for the coming week. Find everything that doesn't directly serve your highest value outcome. I don't care if it's a meeting with important people, or a commitment you made months ago, or something that seems like it should matter. If it doesn't directly serve the outcome you're building, it's noise. Cancel it, reschedule it, delegate it, eliminate it. Do this without guilt. Your attention is more valuable than their comfort. Your clarity is more important than their expectations. Your wealth depends on protecting the space where decisions get made. Protect it accordingly. Most people will resist this. They'll have reasons why every commitment is essential, why every meeting is important, why every input serves some purpose. These reasons are the defense mechanism of a system that doesn't want to change. Don't negotiate with them. Don't explain yourself. Just eliminate. The people who matter will understand. The ones who don't weren't going to help you build wealth anyway. And you'll discover something profound. The space you create by removing noise gets filled with something far more valuable. The capacity to think clearly about what actually matters. And that capacity is the difference between performing wealth and building it. Now we arrive at the part most people get completely wrong. Negotiation. Everyone thinks negotiation is about talking, about making your case, about being persuasive, about having good arguments. And yes, those things matter in some contexts. But in the contexts that determine wealth, negotiation is almost entirely about silence, about the pause, about what you don't say, about the space you create for the other person to fill. This is where the calm millionaire has an advantage that most people never even recognize. Let me show you how this works. Two people walk into the same negotiation. Both have the same information. Both want the same outcome. The first person comes prepared with arguments, with data, with a compelling narrative. They talk through their position. They address objections before they're raised. They fill the silence with persuasion. The second person comes prepared with one clear ask and infinite patience. They state what they want. Then they stop talking. Just stop. And wait. What happens next determines everything. The silence becomes uncomfortable. Humans are wired to fill silence. It feels awkward. It feels like failed communication. So the other party starts talking. And when they talk to fill the void, they reveal things. They reveal their constraints. They reveal their timeline. They reveal their priorities. They reveal their alternatives. They give away information they never intended to share, simply because the silence demanded something from them and you gave them nothing. The first negotiator, the one who filled the space with arguments, never gets this information. They're too busy performing their preparation. They're managing the conversation. They're trying to persuade. And in doing so, they lose the only advantage that actually matters: information asymmetry. When you know more about their situation than they know about yours, you win. And silence is how you create that asymmetry. This is extraordinarily difficult for most people, because silence in negotiation feels like inaction. It feels like you're not doing enough. It feels like you should be working harder to convince them. Your instinct is to fill the space with reasoning, with evidence, with enthusiasm. But every word you add is a data point they can use. Every explanation is a potential weakness they can probe. Every moment you spend talking is a moment you're not listening for what they're accidentally revealing. The calm millionaire understands this at a level most people never reach. They practice the pause. They're comfortable with discomfort. They've trained themselves to wait even when waiting feels wrong. And they've seen the results. Over and over, the person who speaks less gets better terms. Not because they argued better, because they listened better, because they let the other party negotiate against themselves. Here's a specific example. Someone offers you a price for something you're selling. Could be a business, could be equity, could be services. Doesn't matter. You have a number in mind. They make an offer that's below it. The instinct is to counter immediately, to explain why your number is justified, to defend your valuation. This is exactly wrong. Instead, you pause. You let the silence sit. You might even look slightly disappointed without saying why. Then you wait. What happens in that silence? The other person gets uncomfortable. They start wondering if they offended you. They start second-guessing their offer. They start filling the void. We could probably go a bit higher. Or, what number did you have in mind? Or, help me understand your thinking. Every version of this is them moving toward you. You didn't argue. You didn't persuade. You didn't even counter. You just paused, and the pause did the work. This only works if you're genuinely comfortable with the possibility that the conversation ends. If you're desperate, if you need the deal, if you can't walk away, the silence has no power. They'll sense your need and the pause becomes empty. But if you've built your life so that any individual deal doesn't determine your outcome, if you have options, if you're truly patient, then the silence becomes incredibly powerful because it communicates abundance. It communicates that you don't need them more than they need you. This is why the calm millionaire builds from a position of not needing any particular outcome. They have enough. They have options. They have time. So, when they enter a negotiation, they're not negotiating from scarcity. They're negotiating from surplus. And surplus creates leverage that no argument can match. You can sense when someone needs the deal. You can sense when someone is desperate, and you adjust your terms accordingly. But you can't sense anything about someone who's silent except that they're not desperate. And that not being desperate is worth more than any clever argument. Let me show you another dimension of this. Silence also protects you from your own mistakes. Every time you speak in a negotiation, you risk revealing something you shouldn't. You risk making a commitment you don't intend. You risk narrowing your options. Negotiation is fundamentally about keeping your options open while closing theirs. Every word you say potentially closes one of your options. Every silence keeps everything open. Smart negotiators will try to get you talking. They'll ask open-ended questions. They'll create awkward pauses they want you to fill. They'll act confused or hurt or skeptical to provoke explanation. All of these are tactics designed to get you to give away information or commit to positions. The counter tactic is simple. Don't take the bait. Answer the minimum required, then stop. If they ask a question that would require you to reveal your constraints, you can answer briefly and redirect. Or you can pause and let them interpret the silence however they want. This probably sounds manipulative. It might even feel manipulative when you first try it. But negotiation isn't a casual conversation. It's a structured interaction where both parties are trying to get the best terms for themselves. Using silence isn't manipulation. It's discipline. It's refusing to volunteer information that weakens your position. It's recognizing that the person who controls the conversation often loses the negotiation, because controlling requires talking and talking. Think about the best deal you ever got. Not the deals you worked hardest for. The best deal in terms of actual outcome. I'm willing to bet you didn't argue your way into it. You probably stated what you wanted, maybe countered once, and then let them come to you. The deals where you pushed hardest probably weren't your best deals. They were the ones where you were least comfortable with silence, where you felt like you had to convince, where you filled the space with reasoning, and in filling it, you gave away leverage. Now think about the negotiations where you felt overpowered, where the other party got terms that surprised you. What did they do? They probably spoke very little. They probably seemed completely comfortable with you rejecting their offer. They probably let you fill the silences while they just listened. And in listening, they learned exactly how to structure the deal so you'd say yes to terms you weren't planning to accept. This is the silence advantage. It's not about being quiet. It's about being strategically selective with information. It's about recognizing that every word is a choice, and choosing fewer words gives you more options. It's about understanding that discomfort is temporary, but bad deals last forever. So you accept the discomfort of silence to avoid the permanence of suboptimal terms. Here's how you practice this. Start with low-stakes negotiations. When someone quotes you a price, pause for 5 seconds before responding. Just 5 seconds. Don't explain. Don't counter. Just pause. Watch what happens. Most of the time, they'll adjust their offer before you even respond. Or they'll add value. Or they'll explain their pricing in a way that reveals flexibility. That 5-second pause just saved you money or created options you didn't have before. And you didn't say a word, then extend it. In meetings, practice talking half as much as you normally would. Set a timer if you need to. Force yourself to listen more than you contribute. Notice what you learn that you would have missed if you'd been talking. Notice how people start asking for your input instead of you volunteering it. Notice how the things you do say carry more weight because you're not diluting them with volume. Eventually, you internalize this. You become the person who speaks last, who asks clarifying questions but doesn't fill space, who seems perfectly content to let the conversation pause while they think. This shifts how people perceive you. They start assuming you know more than you're saying. They start wondering what you're thinking. They start giving you information hoping to get validation. And all of this happens because you stopped performing negotiation and started using silence as strategy. The calm millionaire doesn't win negotiations by being the smartest person in the room. They win by being the quietest. They let others convince themselves. They let others reveal their hand. They let others make concessions to fill uncomfortable voids. And they do all of this without effort, because they've trained themselves to be comfortable with something most people avoid at all costs. The pause, the gap, the silence where power lives. So here's your practice. The next 3 negotiations you enter, no matter how small, try this. State your position in 1 sentence. Then stop talking. Let them respond. When they respond, pause before you reply. Even if you know what you want to say, pause. Count to 5 in your head. Then respond with the minimum necessary. Watch what happens. Watch how they fill space. Watch how you learn things you wouldn't have learned otherwise. Watch how the terms move in your direction without you pushing. And then realize that this simple practice, scaled across every negotiation in your life, compounds into millions of dollars of additional value. Not because you were more persuasive. Because you were quieter. Everything we've talked about so far builds toward the next principle, and this is where most people's strategy falls apart completely. They think wealth comes from working, from effort, from active income generation. And yes, those things are part of the path, but they're not the destination. The destination is systems, structures that generate wealth without requiring your constant input. Because if you trade time for money, you've capped your outcome at the number of hours you can work, and there's a ceiling on that number. But if you build systems that generate money while you sleep, there's no ceiling at all. The calm millionaire understands this distinction at their core. They don't ask, how can I make more money? They ask, how can I build something that makes money without me? This shift in question changes everything. Because the first question leads to more effort, more hours, more hustle, more exhaustion. The second question leads to leverage, to automation, to systems that compound, to freedom. Let me be specific about what this means. Most people earn money through direct exchange. They do work, they get paid. They do more work, they get paid more. This is fine for survival. It's even fine for building initial capital. But it's a trap if you stay there. Because you're always one illness, one burnout, one life event away from zero income. Your wealth is entirely dependent on your continued ability to perform labor. That's not wealth. That's just expensive employment. The alternative is to build systems that generate value independent of your time. These can be products, investments, platforms, processes, content, intellectual property, anything that creates exchange without requiring your hour-by-hour attention. The first time you make money while you're asleep, something fundamental shifts in your psychology. You realize that the exchange of time for money isn't the only way. That realization opens up possibilities most people never consider. But building these systems requires something most people won't give: patience. Because systems take time to build, and even more time to prove. There's usually a long period where you're putting in effort with no visible return. You're creating something that doesn't pay you yet. You're investing energy into structure rather than immediate income. This is deeply uncomfortable for people who are conditioned to exchange time for money, because there's no immediate feedback loop. You work and nothing happens. You build and nobody pays you. It feels like failure right up until the moment it becomes success. The calm millionaire accepts this discomfort because they understand the math. If you spend a year building a system that generates passive income, and that system pays you for the next 20 years, you've effectively multiplied that year of effort by 20. You've created leverage. But if you spend that same year doing client work or employment, you've earned once. No multiplication, no leverage, just linear exchange. Both paths require similar effort. Only one path compounds. This is why they say no to most active income opportunities. Not because they don't want money, because they don't want to reinforce the pattern of trading time for money. Every yes to client work is a no to system building. Every hour spent on services is an hour not spent on leverage. They protect their time for building specifically because building is the only path to freedom. Everything else is just sophisticated employment. Let me give you a concrete example. Someone has a skill. They're excellent at it. They can charge premium rates for this skill. The conventional path is to do the work, charge the rate, make good money. But the calm millionaire asks a different question. How do I turn this skill into a system? Can I create a product? Can I build a platform? Can I document the process so others can execute it? Can I create intellectual property that generates licensing revenue? Can I train others and take a percentage? Any of these approaches requires more upfront effort, but any of these approaches creates leverage, so they choose the harder path in the short term. They invest 6 months building the product instead of taking 6 months of client work. During those 6 months, they make less money. maybe significantly less, maybe no money. This is where most people quit. They see the opportunity cost and return to the safe pattern of exchanging time for dollars. But the calm millionaire stays the course. They finish the product. They launch it. It makes a small amount of money at first, maybe just a few sales, but then it makes money the next month, and the month after, and a year later, it's generating meaningful income while they work on the next system. Compound that over a decade. Person A keeps doing client work. They get better at it. They raise their rates. They're making 6 figures, which is good, but they're still trading time. If they stop working, income stops. Person B built 10 systems over the same decade. Some failed. Some produced modest returns. 2 became highly successful. Now they're making multiple 6 figures from these systems while spending their time building more systems. The gap between these 2 people isn't talent. It's structure. One built themselves a job. The other built themselves leverage. This applies to investments too. The calm millionaire doesn't just save money. They structure it to generate additional money without their involvement. They're not trading stocks every day. They're not timing markets. They're building a portfolio that pays them to own it. Dividends, interest, appreciation, cash flow from real estate, returns from index funds. Whatever the vehicle, the principle is the same. Money working without them working. Here's where most people fail. They think about systems after they've already built their life around active income. They have the mortgage and the lifestyle and the commitments that require them to keep working actively, so they can't afford the gap. They can't take 6 months to build something with no guaranteed return. They're trapped by their own success at the old game. They can't transition to the new game because the new game requires runway they don't have. The calm millionaire avoids this trap by keeping their life cheap while they're building systems. They don't inflate lifestyle with income. They keep their needs low. They preserve runway. This gives them the freedom to take the bets that lead to leverage. They can spend a year building something that might fail because failure doesn't threaten their survival. This is not about deprivation. It's about optionality. The cheaper your life, the more options you have to build leverage. Most people do the opposite. They make more money and immediately spend more money. This feels like success. It feels like progress, but it eliminates the gap that makes system building possible. They lock themselves into a pattern where they must keep generating active income forever. Meanwhile, someone making half as much but spending a quarter as much has more freedom to build the systems that will eventually surpass them. So the first step to building systems that run without you is creating the space to build them. This means cutting your lifestyle to the minimum that maintains your sanity. This means saying no to lifestyle inflation. This means protecting capital and protecting time. Both resources are required. Capital to invest in the system. Time to build the system. If you're spending all your capital on consumption and all your time on active income, you'll never build leverage. It's not that you can't. It's that you won't, because you've eliminated the conditions that make it possible. Once you have the space, you need to identify what system to build. This is where most people overcomplicate it. They're looking for the perfect idea, the revolutionary concept, the unicorn opportunity. But the calm millionaire knows that boring systems work better than exciting ones. The most successful systems are often simple. They solve a clear problem for a specific group. They don't require innovation. They require execution. So start by looking at what you already know. What do you understand better than most people? What have you done repeatedly? What do people ask you about? What frustrates you that you could solve? The answer to any of these questions is probably a system waiting to be built. Not because the idea is unique, because you have the specific knowledge to execute it properly. Competitive advantage isn't about having the best idea. It's about being able to execute an idea better than others because you understand the context deeply. Then you build the simplest version. Not the complete vision, the simplest version that creates value. This is crucial. Most people try to build the entire system before getting any feedback. They spend months or years creating something comprehensive. Then they launch it and discover the market doesn't want it, or they've built the wrong parts. The calm millionaire ships the minimum viable system, gets feedback, iterates, adds features based on actual demand rather than imagined needs. This approach is faster and wastes less effort. But here's the part that requires discipline. You have to let the system be imperfect. You have to ship before you think it's ready. You have to tolerate the awkwardness of something simple when you can envision something complex. Because perfect is the enemy of revenue. Every day you spend polishing is a day you're not getting paid. Every feature you add before validation is potentially wasted effort. The calm millionaire values feedback over perfection. They ship, learn, iterate. This loop creates leverage faster than any amount of additional planning. Once the system is generating some revenue, even small amounts, you've crossed a threshold. You've proven that the exchange works, that people will pay for what you've built without you being directly involved in every transaction. Now you optimize. You improve conversion. You add the features that matter. You eliminate friction, but you're doing all of this with real data rather than assumptions. You're building based on what works rather than what you think should work. Then you start the next system. This is critical. One system is not enough. One system is still a single point of failure. The Calm Millionaire builds multiple systems. Some fail, some plateau. A few become significant. But the portfolio approach means they're never dependent on any single structure. They diversify their leverage the same way people diversify investments. This creates resilience. If one system falters, others continue generating income. And occasionally, one system becomes so successful it changes everything. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself 5 years from now. You wake up without an alarm. You check your phone and see notifications. Sales while you slept, dividends deposited, subscription renewals, rent payments. Your system's working while you were unconscious. You make coffee without rushing because there's no meeting to get to. No client expecting your time. No employer demanding your presence. The day is entirely yours to structure. You can work on the next system. You can do nothing. You can travel. You can spend time with people who matter. This freedom exists because you built systems instead of jobs. Because you chose leverage over linear income. Because you were patient when patience felt like falling behind. Open your eyes. That future is accessible. But only if you stop trading time for money and start building structures that generate money without trading time. The path from here to there isn't complicated. It's just uncomfortable. You have to give up immediate income to build leverage. You have to tolerate the gap where you're working but not getting paid. You have to ship before you're ready and iterate based on feedback. You have to say no to opportunities that would pull you back into active income. You have to keep your life cheap enough that you have runway. And you have to be patient while the systems mature. Most people won't do these things. They'll read this and agree it makes sense and then go back to trading time for money because it's familiar. The Calm Millionaire does it anyway. Not because it's easy, because it's the only path to freedom that actually works. Your assignment is simple. Identify one skill or knowledge area where you could build a system. Then build the simplest version of that system in the next 90 days. Not the perfect version. Not the complete vision. The simplest version that creates exchange without requiring your hour-by-hour presence. Launch it even if it's embarrassingly simple. Get feedback. Iterate. This single action, if you complete it, will teach you more about building wealth than any book or course ever could. Because you'll experience the discomfort and the delay, and then eventually the leverage. And once you experience leverage, you'll never go back to purely active income again. Now we need to address something that destroys more wealth than any market crash or bad decision. Panic. The inability to remain calm when everyone else is losing their mind. The tendency to make emotional decisions during volatility. The compulsion to act when doing nothing would serve you better. This is where the Calm Millionaire separates from everyone else. Not in their strategy, but in their nervous system. The Stoic portfolio isn't just an investment philosophy. It's a psychological framework. It's built on the understanding that you will face periods of uncertainty, that markets will crash, that opportunities will look like disasters, and disasters will look like opportunities. And in those moments, the person who can remain calm has an asymmetric advantage. Not because they're smarter, because they're not panicking while others are. Think about every major market event in history. Every crash, every correction, every moment of widespread fear. What happens? The majority sells at the bottom. They see their portfolio declining, and they can't tolerate the discomfort. They imagine worst-case scenarios. They convince themselves that this time is different, that the decline won't reverse, that they need to protect what's left. So they sell. They crystallize their losses. And then the market recovers, as it always has, and they've locked in permanent loss while trying to avoid temporary pain. Meanwhile, a small group does the opposite. They see the same decline. They feel the same discomfort. But they don't act on it. They recognize that temporary declines are the price of long-term gains. They understand that volatility is not the same as risk. They know that their strategy was built for this exact moment. So they stay calm. Some even buy more. And when the market recovers, their wealth compounds from a lower base. They didn't get lucky. They just didn't panic. This is anti-fragility. Building a system that benefits from volatility rather than being destroyed by it. But anti-fragility in your portfolio requires anti-fragility in your psychology first. If you panic when numbers go down, you'll make decisions that guarantee those declines become permanent. If you can stay calm, you can make decisions that turn those declines into opportunity. The calm millionaire builds their financial life specifically to make calm possible. They don't over-leverage. They don't invest money they might need soon. They don't structure their life such that short-term portfolio volatility threatens their survival. This is crucial. If you need your investments to maintain value every single month because you're living at the edge of your means. But if you've built cushion, if you have runway, if your lifestyle is cheap enough that portfolio swings don't threaten your immediate needs, then you can think clearly. You can evaluate without emotion. You can recognize that a 20% decline in a diversified portfolio is statistically normal and historically temporary. This recognition doesn't come from intelligence. It comes from structure. You built your life so that volatility doesn't scare you, which means you can make decisions based on probability rather than fear. Let me give you specific principles. First, you never invest money you might need in the next 5 years. Never. Doesn't matter how good the opportunity looks. Doesn't matter how confident you are. If there's any chance you'll need that capital soon, it stays liquid. Because needing to sell during a downturn eliminates all strategy. You're no longer investing. You're surviving. And survival mode makes terrible investment decisions. Second, you structure for income and growth separately. You have assets that pay you regularly, and this income covers your life. Then you have growth assets that you don't touch. The growth portion can be volatile because you never need to access it during that volatility. It's just numbers on a screen that will eventually go up. But if you're relying on selling growth assets to fund your life, you can't tolerate the volatility. You'll panic and sell at the worst time. Third, you diversify not for average returns, but for peace of mind. Yes, concentration might produce higher returns, but concentration also produces stress. If your entire portfolio is in 3 stocks, you'll watch them constantly. You'll react to news. You'll make emotional decisions. Whereas if you're diversified across assets, sectors, and geographies, no single event can destroy you. This allows calm, and calm allows good decisions. The slightly lower returns from diversification are worth it because they buy you the psychological capacity to stick with the strategy. Fourth, you automate everything. You don't make active investment decisions based on news or feelings or predictions. You set the allocation. You rebalance on a schedule. You add capital systematically. You remove emotion from the process entirely. Because every manual decision is an opportunity for panic to override strategy. The less you touch it, the better you do. This is statistically proven. Active traders underperform passive investors not because they're stupid, because they're human. They panic at the wrong times. Automation prevents this. Fifth, you practice the decline. This sounds strange, but it's essential. You visualize your portfolio dropping 30%. You imagine the news headlines. You feel the discomfort in your body. Then you plan your response. You decide in advance, when you're calm, what you'll do when you're not calm. You write it down. When the market is falling and I feel panic, I will do nothing for 48 hours. Then I will review my allocation and rebalance if needed. This pre-commitment prevents you from making permanent mistakes during temporary pain. The calm millionaire has lived through multiple cycles. They've seen their portfolio drop significantly. They've felt the fear, but they didn't act on it. They had the structure and the discipline to stay calm. And every time they stayed calm during a decline, their future self benefited enormously. This creates a feedback loop. Each instance of maintaining calm reinforces the belief that maintaining calm works. Eventually, they're not even tempted to panic. They've trained their nervous system to interpret volatility as opportunity rather than threat. But here's what most people miss. This training doesn't happen during calm markets. It happens during chaos. You can't practice courage when there's nothing to fear. You can't practice discipline when there's no temptation. So when the market declines, when your portfolio drops, when everyone around you is panicking, that's not a crisis. That's your training session. That's where you build the capacity that will serve you for decades. If you panic, you've failed the training and guaranteed future panic. If you stay calm, you've strengthened the capacity that compounds into millions of dollars of additional lifetime wealth. Here's a real scenario. It's March 2020. The market has dropped 30% in 3 weeks. Every headline is about economic collapse. People you know are selling everything. You look at your portfolio and it's down significantly. You feel nauseous. You can't sleep. Every instinct is telling you to sell before it drops more. What do? If you're most people, you sell. You tell yourself you'll buy back in when things calm down, but they never calm down at a lower price than you sold. By the time things feel calm, the market has recovered. You sold low and bought high. You did the opposite of what works. and you guaranteed that the temporary decline became a permanent loss. If you're the calm millionaire, you check your structure. Do I need this money in the next 5 years? No. Has my thesis about these investments changed? No. Is this decline outside historical norms? No, then I do nothing. In fact, I rebalance. The stock allocation is now below my target, so I buy more stocks at these lower prices. This feels insane. Every emotional signal says this is wrong, but the structure says it's right. And the structure was built for exactly this moment. So you trust the structure over the emotion. You stay calm. You might even buy more. Then you stop looking at the portfolio for a month. 2 months later, the market has recovered most of the decline. A year later, it's at all-time highs. The person who panicked missed the recovery. The person who stayed calm captured the entire rebound. This single decision, multiplied across a lifetime of similar situations, is worth millions of dollars. Not because of genius, because of structure, because of calm, because of refusing to let temporary emotion override long-term strategy. This applies beyond markets. Every business faces volatility. Every venture has moments where it looks like failure. The calm millionaire doesn't interpret these moments as signals to quit. They interpret them as expected turbulence. They've built enough runway that temporary difficulties don't threaten their survival. They've structured their psychology to tolerate discomfort without reacting. They know that the businesses that survive volatility often become monopolies because everyone else quit. So they stay in the game when others exit. But you can't do this if you're over-leveraged. If you're living at the edge of your capacity, if every downturn threatens your lifestyle. That's why the Stoic portfolio starts with the life, not the investments. You build a life cheap enough that you can tolerate portfolio volatility. Then you build a portfolio that's diversified enough that you can tolerate sector volatility. Then you build the psychology that lets you do nothing when doing nothing is optimal. All 3 pieces are required. Most people only focus on the investments. They optimize returns without optimizing the structure that makes those returns capturable. And when volatility comes, they panic and lose everything they optimized for. So ask yourself right now, if your portfolio dropped 40% tomorrow and stayed there for 2 years, would you be okay? Not happy? Okay. Could you maintain your life? Could you resist selling? Could you stay calm? If the answer is no, your life is too expensive, or your allocation is too aggressive, or you don't have enough liquidity. Fix this before you do anything else. Because if you can't stay calm during volatility, your strategy doesn't matter. You'll override it at the worst possible time. But if you can stay calm, if you've built the structure that makes calm possible, then volatility becomes your friend. You can rebalance into it. You can add capital during it. You can wait patiently while others panic. And the wealth that follows that calm is enormous. The calm millionaire isn't calm because they're naturally relaxed people. They're calm because they built their life and their portfolio to make calm the only rational response. They remove the conditions that cause panic. They created the structure that rewards patience. They practiced staying still when movement would feel better but perform worse. And over time, this practice compounds into the kind of wealth that doesn't depend on being right. It depends on not being wrong, on not panicking, on not selling low, on not interrupting the compound. That's the Stoic portfolio. That's anti-fragility. And it's accessible to anyone willing to build the structure before they need it. We need to talk about something that makes most people uncomfortable. Relationships as strategy, not manipulation, not using people, but recognizing that your network determines your net worth in ways that have nothing to do with what you know and everything to do with who trusts you. The calm millionaire understands that 5 deep relationships with the right people are worth more than 500 shallow connections with everyone. Most networking is performative. People collecting business cards, people showing up to events to be seen, people connecting on platforms without any real relationship. This is noise. It's activity that feels like progress but produces nothing. Because transaction-based relationships don't generate opportunity. They generate exchanges. You met someone you might work together someday, probably not. The connection exists in theory but not in practice. The calm millionaire approaches relationships completely differently. They don't network. They build friendships with people they respect. They invest deeply in a small number of connections rather than superficially in a large number. They focus on people who are either on similar paths or ahead on the path they want to travel. And they approach these relationships without agenda. Not because agenda is wrong, because agenda is obvious and it kills the relationship before it starts. Think about the people who've helped you most in your life. The ones who opened doors or made introductions or gave you opportunities. Were they people you met once at a networking event? Or were they people who actually knew you, People who understood your capabilities because they'd seen them directly. People who trusted you enough to stake their own reputation on your potential. The latter. Always the latter. Deep relationships generate opportunity because the other person knows you well enough to take a bet on you. Shallow relationships generate nothing because there's no foundation for that bet. So the first principle is depth over breadth. You don't want to know everyone. You want to know a few people well enough that they'd take your call at midnight. Well enough that they'd introduce you to their most valuable contacts. Well enough that they trust your judgment and want you to succeed. This level of relationship doesn't come from networking events. It comes from time, from shared experience, from demonstrating your character repeatedly. It can't be rushed. It can't be manufactured. It can only be earned through consistency. The second principle is value first. You don't build relationships by taking. You build them by giving, by helping without asking for anything in return, by making introductions that benefit others, by sharing knowledge freely, by being useful in ways that have nothing to do with your agenda. This feels counterintuitive to people who think relationships are transactions. But it's the only approach that works for deep relationships. Because deep relationships are based on trust, and trust comes from seeing someone prioritize your interest over their own. Let me give you a specific example. You meet someone who's further ahead than you. They've built businesses, they have resources, they have access. The transactional approach is to ask for their help, to pitch them your idea, to try to get them to invest or advise or connect you with their network. This almost never works. They've seen this approach 1,000 times. Every person they meet wants something from them. You're just another person with your hand out. The strategic approach is different. You study what they're working on. You identify something you can help with based on your specific knowledge or skills. You help them without asking for anything. Maybe you introduce them to someone who'd be useful to them. Maybe you send them research relevant to their current project. Maybe you solve a small problem they mentioned in passing. You demonstrate competence and generosity. You prove you understand their world. And you do this without expectation. What happens next is everything. If you helped meaningfully, they remember. They're not used to people giving without asking. It creates a psychological debt, but more importantly, it creates curiosity. Who is this person? Why did they help? Are they always like this? They start paying attention. And when they pay attention, they eventually find a way to reciprocate. Not because you asked, because they want to. The relationship is now based on mutual value rather than one-sided extraction. And that foundation makes everything else possible. This approach requires patience because the return isn't immediate. You might help someone and hear nothing for months. You might give value without any visible reciprocation. This is where most people quit. They helped once, didn't get anything, and decided the strategy doesn't work. But the calm millionaire knows that meaningful relationships operate on longer time frames. They help consistently without keeping score. They understand that the person they helped in January might become their most valuable connection in December, but only if they didn't make the help transactional. The third principle is selectivity. You can't build deep relationships with everyone. You have limited time and energy, so you choose carefully. You focus on people whose values align with yours, people who are building interesting things, people who have integrity and treat others well, people who are generous with their knowledge, people you'd want to be around even if there was no business benefit. This filter is crucial because you're going to invest significant time in these relationships. If you invest in the wrong people, you waste the most valuable resource you have. How do you identify the right people? You watch how they treat people who can't help them. You watch whether they keep commitments. You watch whether they're generous or extractive in their other relationships. You watch whether they're building something real or performing success. These observations take time. You can't assess someone in one meeting. But over months of low-stakes interaction, character reveals itself. The people with strong character are the ones you invest in. Everyone else is pleasant but not strategic. The fourth principle is long-term reciprocity. Deep relationships work because both parties are playing an infinite game. You help them today. They help you next year. You introduce them to someone valuable. They do the same for you when it makes sense. There's no scorekeeping because you both understand the relationship exists across decades. This removes all the awkwardness of transactional networking. You're not asking for favors. You're participating in a relationship where value flows both directions over time. And because it's long-term, there's no pressure for immediate return. This creates a multiplier effect. When you have 5 relationships like this, you effectively have access to 5 networks instead of 1, because these people will make introductions for you. They'll think of you when opportunities arise. They'll defend your reputation to people you've never met. Not because they owe you, because they genuinely want you to succeed. And this happens across multiple relationships simultaneously. So opportunities start coming to you without you seeking them. You become the person people think of when they need someone with your capability. This is how the calm millionaire operates. They don't chase opportunity. They build relationships that make opportunity find them. But here's what this requires. You have to be genuinely interested in other people's success. Not pretend interested, actually interested. If you're faking it, they'll sense it eventually and the relationship will hollow out. But if you genuinely care about their projects, their challenges, their growth, then helping them feels natural rather than strategic. This is why character matters. If you're only capable of caring about your own success, you can't build these relationships. But if you can expand your definition of winning to include the success of people you respect, then this approach becomes sustainable. You're not performing generosity. You're being generous because you want these people to win. The calm millionaire curates their close network carefully. They might have 5 to 10 people they'd consider deep relationships. People they talk to regularly, people whose judgment they trust, people they'd help with significant effort if needed. Beyond that, they have a broader network of people they respect and interact with occasionally. But the deep relationships get the majority of relationship energy because those are the ones that compound. Those are the ones that generate the opportunities that change everything. So here's your practice. Identify 5 people you respect who are building interesting things. Commit to helping them meaningfully over the next year without asking for anything in return. Study what they're working on. Find ways to add value based on your specific knowledge. Make introductions when relevant. Share insights that might help them. Be consistent and generous. Watch what happens. Over time, these relationships will become some of the most valuable assets in your entire life. Not because you networked effectively, because you built friendships with people worth knowing. And friendships between capable people generate opportunity automatically. Now we arrive at the hardest practice for most people, saying no. The calm millionaire says no to almost everything, not because they're antisocial or difficult, because they understand that every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that matters. Their default answer is no. They only say yes when something clearly serves their highest priority outcome. This sounds simple until you try it. Then you realize how much pressure exists to say yes. Most people say yes too often. They say yes to meetings that don't matter, to opportunities that look good but don't fit their strategy, to requests for their time that serve someone else's agenda, to projects that sound interesting but dilute their focus. They say yes because saying no feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're being unhelpful. It feels like you're missing out. It feels like you're burning bridges. So they say yes, and then they wonder why they're busy but not progressing. The calm millionaire has trained themselves to tolerate the discomfort of no. They've practiced it enough that it doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like protection. They're protecting their time, their energy, their focus. They're protecting the space where their highest value work happens. They're protecting their capacity to say yes to the things that actually matter. Every no is in service of a more important yes. Once you frame it this way, saying no becomes easier. You're not rejecting the other person. You're choosing your priority. Here's a framework for this. Before you say yes to anything, ask yourself 3 questions. Does this directly serve my highest priority outcome? Will I be the best person to do this, or could someone else do it better? Will I be happy I said yes to this 6 months from now? If the answer to all 3 is yes, you say yes. If the answer to any of them is no, you say no. This sounds harsh. It is harsh. But it's the only way to protect your time from being consumed by other people's priorities. Let me give you specific scenarios. Someone asks for a coffee meeting to pick your brain. The transactional people pleaser says yes because saying no feels rude. The calm millionaire asks what they want to discuss. If it's genuinely something where you can help and they've done their homework, maybe it's worth it. But usually it's just someone wanting free consulting, so you say no. You can soften it. I'm focused on a specific project right now and not taking meetings. But you say no. Your time is worth more than making someone else feel accommodated. Someone asks you to join their board or advisor team. It sounds prestigious. It looks good on a resume. But it's going to require 10 hours a month of meetings and preparation. Is that 10 hours better spent on this or on your highest priority outcome? For most people, the answer is obvious once they actually calculate the cost. But they don't calculate the cost. They just see the prestige and say yes. Then they're trapped in commitments that don't serve them. The calm millionaire calculates the cost. Usually says no. Occasionally says yes if the strategic value is genuinely there. Someone pitches you an investment opportunity. It sounds interesting. It might make money. But it's outside your area of expertise. It requires active involvement. It would fragment your focus across one more thing. The people pleaser says yes because they don't want to miss out. The calm millionaire says no because they're already focused on their highest probability path. They're not interested in mediocre diversification. They're interested in concentrated excellence. So they pass. Even if the opportunity is good, because good is the enemy of great, and they're focused on great. This is the power of the calculated no. It's not reflexive rejection. It's strategic protection. You're evaluating every request against your priority. Most requests fail this evaluation, so most requests get declined. But the few that pass get your full attention. This creates a massive difference in outcomes. Most people dilute their capability across 40 things. The calm millionaire concentrates their capability on 4 things. Same amount of total capability, radically different results. But saying no requires something most people don't have. Clarity about what you're saying yes to. If you don't know what your highest priority outcome is, you can't evaluate requests against it. Everything looks potentially valuable because you have no filter. This is why the calm millionaire starts with ruthless clarity about what they're building. They define the outcome. They identify the path. Then they say no to everything that's not on the path. Without this clarity, saying no is just random rejection. With this clarity, saying no is strategic focus. Here's what this looks like in practice. You wake up knowing exactly what you're building. You've defined it clearly. You know what success looks like. You know what actions compound toward that success. Every day you protect time for those actions. When requests come in, you have a filter. Does this serve what I'm building? Most requests don't. So you decline them politely but firmly. The few that do serve what you're building get real attention. This creates momentum. You're not scattered across dozens of mediocre activities. You're concentrated on the few activities that compound. This makes some people uncomfortable. They think you're being selfish. They think you're not being a team player. They think you're missing opportunities. Let them think whatever they want. You're building wealth and they're busy being accommodating. 10 years from now, your outcomes will speak for themselves. And they'll be asking how you did it. The answer will be simple. You said no to almost everything so you could say yes to the only things that mattered. The calm millionaire also says no to opportunities that look good but don't fit their timeline. This is subtle but crucial. An opportunity might be genuinely valuable, but require your focus for 2 years. If you're already committed to something else for 2 years, you say no to the new opportunity, even if it looks better. Because switching costs are real. Because starting over has overhead. Because deep work requires sustained focus. You finish what you started before taking on something new. This discipline prevents the pattern of serial starting that traps most people. They begin things but never finish them because they keep switching to the next shiny opportunity. Saying no also protects you from energy vampires. People who want your time but give nothing back. People who create drama. People who have problems they want you to solve without doing their own work first. These people will consume infinite time if you let them. The people pleaser feels obligated to help. The calm millionaire recognizes that some people don't want help. They want attention. They want you to make them feel better without them changing anything. You can't help these people. You can only waste your time trying. So you say no. You set boundaries. You protect your energy for people who are actually trying to improve. Here's your practice. For the next 30 days, your default answer to any request is not yes, but let me think about it. This buys you time to evaluate properly instead of reflexively agreeing. Then you apply the framework. Does this serve my highest priority outcome? Will I be the best person for this? Will I be happy I said yes 6 months from now? If all 3 are yes, you say yes. Otherwise, you decline. Track how many things you would have said yes to reflexively that you said no to after evaluation. That number represents the amount of life you're reclaiming, the amount of energy you're protecting, the amount of focus you're preserving for what actually matters. Most people will fail this practice. They'll say they're going to evaluate everything and then they'll keep saying yes to things because saying no is uncomfortable. If you're one of the few who actually does it, who actually protects your time with disciplined no's, you'll discover something profound. Saying no gets easier with practice. The discomfort fades, the guilt diminishes, and what remains is clarity, power, progress. Because you're finally saying yes to what matters by saying no to everything else. That's the calculated no. That's how the calm millionaire protects their most valuable resource. Not money, time, not time in general. Time for the few activities that compound into everything they're building. Everything we've discussed requires one practice that nobody wants to hear about. Patience. Not the passive kind where you wait and hope. The active kind where you delay gratification strategically because you understand that time is the multiplier that transforms good decisions into exceptional outcomes. The calm millionaire has weaponized patience. While everyone else is optimizing for quarterly results, they're playing a 10-year game. While others are chasing quick wins, they're building positions that become unassailable given enough time. This is extraordinarily difficult in a culture that rewards speed. Everything tells you to move fast, launch fast, grow fast, exit fast. But speed often works against you, because the most valuable opportunities require time to mature. Compound interest requires time. Skill development requires time. Relationship depth requires time. Brand trust requires time. Market position requires time. All of the things that actually create lasting wealth require the one thing most people won't give: patience. Think about any wealth-building strategy that actually works. Real estate appreciation, index fund returns, business compounding. All of them require holding through periods where nothing seems to be happening, where the numbers aren't impressive yet, where your friends are making faster gains doing other things, where you question whether this is working. This is where most people quit. They abandon the patient strategy for something that promises faster results, and in doing so, they reset the clock. They give up compounding that was starting to work for a new strategy that has to start from zero. The calm millionaire doesn't do this. They choose a strategy based on sound principles. They execute the strategy consistently. They hold through the boring middle. They don't abandon it when something else looks more exciting. They understand that the boring middle is where wealth gets built. The exciting beginning and the triumphant end get all the attention, but the boring middle is where compounding happens, where time does the work that effort can't, where patience becomes profit. This applies to investments in the most obvious way. If you buy quality assets and hold them for decades, you will build wealth. Not might, will. This is historically proven. The people who bought index funds 30 years ago and did nothing are wealthy now, not because they were smart, because they were patient. They didn't sell during crashes. They didn't chase hot stocks. They didn't time markets. They just held, and time multiplied their capital automatically. But most people can't do this. They see their portfolio up 20% and they want to take profits. They see it down 20% and they want to cut losses. They're constantly acting on short-term movements. Each action resets the compounding. Each trade has costs. Each decision risks being wrong. Meanwhile, the patient investor does nothing, just holds, just lets time work. And over decades, the patient investor dramatically outperforms the active trader. Not sometimes, consistently, because patience is a competitive advantage that most people can't replicate. This applies to skills too. If you practice something consistently for 10 years, you become exceptional. Doesn't matter what it is. 10 years of deliberate practice makes you world-class. But most people practice something for 6 months, don't see dramatic results, and switch to something else. They spend their entire life being mediocre at 10 things instead of exceptional at one thing. The calm millionaire picks one valuable skill and commits to decades of improvement. They're not looking for fast mastery. They're building competence that compounds. They know that year 1 produces small improvements. Year 5 produces significant improvements. Year 10 produces mastery that can't be competed with. But you only get to year 10 by being patient through years 1 through 9. The same pattern applies to business building. Most businesses fail not because the idea was wrong, but because the founder quit too early. They expected year 1 to produce significant revenue. When it didn't, they decided the business wasn't working. But most successful businesses take 3 to 5 years to find product market fit, another 3 to 5 years to scale profitably. The businesses that survive this timeline often become dominant, because everyone else quit during the boring middle. The calm millionaire knows this, so they plan for a 10-year business timeline from day 1. This changes everything about how they operate. They're not trying to get rich quick. They're building something that will be valuable in a decade. This removes all the pressure that causes bad decisions. They can experiment. They can pivot. They can learn. Because they're not evaluating success on a quarterly basis. They're evaluating on a decade basis. Here's what patience actually looks like. You start a business. Year 1 is hard. Revenue is small. You're working more hours than employment would require. Friends are making more money in their jobs. You question the decision constantly, but you keep going. Year 2 is slightly better. Revenue grows, but not dramatically. You're still grinding, still uncertain, still wondering if this was the right choice. Year 3, something shifts. The systems start working. The reputation starts spreading. Revenue becomes more predictable. Year 5, you're profitable and growing. Year 10, you've built something that generates significant wealth with decreasing effort. This is the patient path. Most people quit in year 2. They never get to year 5. They definitely never get to year 10. The calm millionaire stays. Not because year 2 feels good, because year 10 pays off. But patience is hard because the culture celebrates speed. Every success story you hear is compressed. Built a company and sold it in 2 years. Made millions trading stocks in 6 months. Became an influencer overnight. These stories are either lies, survivorship bias, or they omit the 10 years of preparation that made the 2-year success possible. But people hear them and conclude that if they're not seeing dramatic results quickly, they're doing something wrong. This is exactly backwards. If you're seeing dramatic results quickly, you're probably taking on risk that will eventually destroy you. Or you got lucky and luck doesn't compound. Sustainable wealth is built slowly, consistently, patiently, over time frames that feel uncomfortable to people who want validation now. The calm millionaire has made peace with delayed gratification. They don't need to see results today. They don't need validation quarterly. They're comfortable working on something that won't pay off for years. This psychological capacity is rare. Most people need faster feedback loops. They need to see progress monthly, or they conclude they're failing. But the most valuable opportunities have long feedback loops. You plant the seed, you water it, you wait. Eventually it becomes a tree. But if you dig it up every month to check if it's growing, you kill it. Patience means leaving it alone, trusting the process, waiting for time to do what time does. Let me give you a specific scenario. You have $10,000 to invest. You can put it in a speculative opportunity that might double quickly or might go to zero. Or you can put it in a boring index fund that will likely return 7 to 10% annually. The impatient person chooses the speculative bet. They want the double. They want it fast. They can't tolerate the boring option, even though the math is better. The patient person chooses the boring option. They know that $10,000 compounding at 8% for 30 years becomes over $100,000. They know the speculative bet probably fails. They choose certain compounding over unlikely doubling. This decision, repeated across a lifetime, is the difference between wealth and poverty. But here's what makes patience truly powerful. It's not just about waiting. It's about using time as a filter. The opportunities that require patience automatically filter out most competition. Because most people won't wait. If something takes 5 years to pay off, most people will quit after 1 year. This means that anyone who can be patient has less competition. They're competing against the tiny percentage of people who can delay gratification for years. The patient path is less crowded. The rewards are larger. The success rate is higher. Not because it's easier, because fewer people can tolerate it. Think about this in career terms. You can optimize for immediate income by taking the highest paying job available. Or you can optimize for learning by taking a lower paying job where you'll gain more valuable skills. The impatient person takes the money now. The patient person takes the learning. 5 years later, the patient person has skills that command much higher income. 10 years later, they've built a career that pays multiples of what the impatient person earns. The impatient person was winning years 1 through 3. The patient person is winning years 5 through 50. Which would you rather have? The calm millionaire thinks in decades. They're making decisions today that won't fully pay off until they're 50 or 60. This sounds depressing to people who are 30. But it's actually liberating. Because if you're playing a 30-year game, today's setbacks are meaningless. Today's slow progress is fine. Today's lack of validation doesn't matter. You're not trying to win this year. You're trying to build something that wins across your entire life. This reframe removes so much pressure. You can breathe. You can make better decisions. You can avoid the panic that destroys most people's wealth. Take a breath with me now. In through your nose slowly, counting to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through your mouth for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do this 2 more times. Notice how patience feels in your body. Notice the space between breath in and breath out. That space is where wealth builds, not in the action, in the pause, in the patience, in the willingness to let time do the work. The calm millionaire has learned to enjoy the wait. They've stopped measuring success by speed. They measure it by direction and consistency. Are they moving toward their goal? Yes. Are they doing it consistently? Yes. Then they're succeeding, even if the results aren't visible yet. This internal definition of success protects them from the comparison trap. They're not competing with people who are 2 years ahead. They're competing with who they were last year, and as long as they're better than last year, they're winning the only game that matters. Here's your practice. Identify one thing you've been impatient about. Maybe it's an investment that hasn't appreciated yet. Maybe it's a skill you're developing. Maybe it's a business that's growing slower than you hoped. Now reframe it. Instead of evaluating it on current results, evaluate it on direction. Is it moving the right way? Is there any evidence that time will improve it? If yes, commit to patience. Decide right now that you'll give it 5 more years before evaluating whether to continue. Write down this commitment. This removes the daily questioning. This gives you permission to be patient. And patience, sustained over years, is the competitive advantage that most people will never develop. The minimalist empire is where all of this comes together. Most people think scaling requires complexity. More employees, more systems, more infrastructure, more overhead. The calm millionaire knows this is backwards. The most profitable businesses are often the simplest. One person or a tiny team, minimal overhead, maximum profit per employee. They're not trying to build something impressive. They're trying to build something profitable and peaceful. Think about the traditional business advice. Hire fast, scale aggressively, build the team, get the office, establish the systems. All of this requires capital, requires management, requires complexity, and complexity kills profit margins. It also kills peace, because the more complex your business, the more things can break. The more people involved, the more human problems you have to manage. The more infrastructure, the more fixed costs you're committed to. You've built something that looks successful but feels like a prison. The minimalist empire rejects all of this. You start with the question, what's the most profit I can generate with the least infrastructure? This leads to completely different decisions. You don't hire unless absolutely necessary. You automate instead of employing. You outsource instead of building internal capacity. You keep fixed costs minimal. You build something that could survive on just you if needed. This isn't about being cheap. It's about preserving optionality and maximizing profit. Let me give you specific numbers. Business A has 10 employees, an office, significant software subscriptions, and generates $1 million in revenue with $300,000 in profit. Business B has 1 person, works remotely, uses minimal tools, and generates $300,000 in revenue with $250,000 in profit. Which business is better? Most people would say Business A because the revenue is higher. But Business B is objectively better. Higher profit margin, lower stress, complete flexibility. 1 person keeping most of the profit instead of 10 people sharing less. This is the minimalist empire. Maximum outcome with minimum complexity. But building this way requires discipline because you're constantly resisting the urge to scale traditionally. Someone tells you you need to hire to grow. You ignore them. Someone says you need an office to be taken seriously. You ignore them. Someone suggests you need more infrastructure to be professional. You ignore all of it because you've done the math. You know that every employee reduces your profit per person. Every fixed cost reduces your flexibility. Every piece of infrastructure adds complexity that doesn't serve the outcome you're building. The calm millionaire asks a different question than most business builders. They don't ask, how can I grow this? They ask, how can I make this more profitable without growing it? This leads to completely different strategies. Instead of adding employees, they raise prices. Instead of adding features, they remove complexity. Instead of serving more customers, they serve fewer customers better. Instead of scaling horizontally, they deepen their position with existing customers. All of these strategies increase profit without increasing overhead. Here's what this looks like practically. You build a service business. Traditional advice says you need a team to scale. Instead, you keep it just you. You charge premium prices. You work with fewer clients. You become known for exceptional quality rather than scale. You make the same profit as someone with a team, but you keep all of it. And you work fewer hours because you're not managing people. You've built a minimalist empire. It doesn't look impressive on paper, but your bank account and your stress levels tell the real story. Or you build a product business. Traditional advice says you need features to compete. Instead, you build the simplest version that solves the core problem. You charge appropriately. You have a smaller market, but you dominate it. You spend minimal time on customer service because the product is simple. You have no team because the product doesn't require one. You've automated what can be automated. What's left is pure profit. This is the minimalist empire. Lean, profitable, peaceful. The key is understanding that revenue is not the goal. Profit per hour of your time is the goal. If you make $500,000 in revenue, but it requires 80 hours a week and you keep $100,000, you're making $125 per hour. If you make $200,000 in revenue working 20 hours a week and you keep $180,000, you're making $173 per hour, plus you have 60 hours of your life back every week. Which would you choose? Most people never do this math. They optimize for revenue because revenue sounds impressive. They build complexity because complexity looks like success. They hire because having employees feels like winning, but they never calculate profit per hour of life. They never ask whether the additional revenue is worth the additional complexity. The calm millionaire does this calculation constantly. Every potential addition to the business is evaluated. Does this increase profit per hour or decrease it? If it decreases it, the answer is no, even if it increases total profit. Because total profit at the cost of your life is not winning. This leads to some counterintuitive decisions. You turn down customers because serving them would require infrastructure you don't want to build. You keep prices high because low prices would require volume that demands a team. You stay small because small is more profitable per hour. These decisions make no sense to people optimizing for traditional metrics. But they make perfect sense when you're optimizing for profit and peace simultaneously. The minimalist empire also has massive strategic advantages. You can pivot quickly because you have minimal infrastructure locking you into any particular approach. You can weather downturns because your fixed costs are minimal. You can take risks because failure doesn't bankrupt you. You can experiment because experiments don't require committee approval. You have all the advantages of a large business without any of the disadvantages. This is only possible by keeping everything simple, but simple requires discipline. Because growth feels good. Hiring feels like progress. Building infrastructure feels like building something real. You have to resist all of these temptations. You have to be comfortable with your business looking smaller than it could be. You have to be okay with people underestimating you, because you don't have the visible markers of success. The calm millionaire is completely comfortable with this. They know that the best businesses often look boring from the outside. They're optimizing for metrics that don't show up in conversations. Profit margin, time freedom, peace of mind, optionality. So here's the question you need to answer. What could you build that would generate enough profit to support your life without requiring traditional scaling? Could you offer a premium service to a small number of clients? Could you create a product that sells itself? Could you build a tiny software business that solves a specific problem? Could you create content that generates passive income? The answer is probably yes. The question is whether you have the discipline to stay simple instead of scaling complexly. Whether you can resist the urge to look impressive and instead optimize for profit per hour of life. That's the minimalist empire. That's how the calm millionaire builds wealth without building a prison. Now we need to address the thing that's destroying your strategic thinking more than anything else. Your phone. Your constant connectivity. Your inability to disconnect. The calm millionaire knows that you cannot think clearly in an environment of perpetual input. You cannot see opportunities when you're drowning in noise. You cannot make strategic decisions when you're always reacting. So they practice something most people consider impossible. Digital detox. Regular, scheduled periods of complete disconnection. This sounds extreme until you try it. Then you realize how much your connected state has degraded your thinking. You're constantly in reactive mode, responding to messages, processing inputs, consuming content. There's no space for the kind of deep thinking that reveals non-obvious opportunities. You're operating tactically when you should be operating strategically. And tactical thinking, no matter how efficient, will never build the wealth that strategic thinking builds. The calm millionaire structures their week with protected thinking time. This isn't time to work. It's time to think about the work. To question assumptions, to explore alternatives, to notice patterns, to connect ideas that seem unrelated. This kind of thinking is impossible with a phone nearby, because the phone interrupts, not just with notifications. With the possibility of interruption, your brain knows that you could check something at any moment, so it never fully commits to deep thought. It stays in a mode of partial attention, and partial attention produces mediocre thinking. So they build disconnection into their structure. Maybe it's 1 day per week with no phone. Maybe it's the first 3 hours of every day with no internet. Maybe it's 1 week per quarter completely offline. The specific method doesn't matter. What matters is creating space where strategic thinking can happen, where you're not reacting, where you're not consuming, where you're just thinking clearly about what matters most. Here's what happens during digital detox. The first few hours are uncomfortable. You feel the compulsion to check, to see what you're missing, to stay updated. This discomfort is withdrawal. You're addicted to input. Your brain has... By the end of the first day, something fundamental has shifted. You realize how much mental energy you were spending on inputs that don't matter, how much of your attention was colonized by platforms that don't serve you, how much clearer your thinking is without the noise. This clarity reveals opportunities, shows you what to eliminate, helps you see what matters, and you realize that all of this was available to you the entire time. You just couldn't access it while connected. The calm millionaire has experienced this enough times that they protect this practice fiercely. They know that their best decisions come from disconnected thinking. They know that the insights that change everything don't come while scrolling. They come during long walks without phones, during mornings with just coffee and a notebook, during weekends where they're completely unreachable, so they create these conditions regularly. Not occasionally, regularly. This is how they maintain the clarity that most people lose permanently. But digital detox only works if you actually disconnect. Not just reduce usage. Disconnect completely. The phone is off or not with you. The computer is closed. There's no sneaking to check one thing. Because one thing becomes 10 things becomes the entire day consumed. Complete disconnection is the only version that produces the cognitive shift you need. Partial disconnection is just slower consumption. It doesn't create the space for strategic thinking. Here's a protocol you can use. Pick one day in the next week. From the moment you wake up until the moment you sleep, no screens, no phone, no computer, no tablet. If you need to communicate with someone, tell them in advance. If something is truly urgent, they can reach you another way. But nothing is as urgent as you think. The world will not end. Your business will not collapse. What will happen is you'll think more clearly than you've thought in months. You'll see your life from the outside instead of being trapped inside it. You'll notice what actually matters instead of what feels urgent. During this day, don't just do nothing. That's not the point. Do things that engage your mind without screens. Read physical books. Write longhand. Go for long walks. Have deep conversations. Think about your strategy. Question your assumptions. Plan your next moves. This is active thinking time, not passive rest time. You're using the clarity that comes from disconnection to do the kind of thinking that compounds into better decisions. After the first detox day, evaluate what you noticed. What came up that you've been avoiding? What opportunities did you see? What should you eliminate? What should you prioritize? Write these insights down. They're valuable. Then commit to doing this regularly. Weekly is ideal. Monthly is minimum. The specific frequency matters less than the consistency. You're training your brain that it's safe to think deeply, that it doesn't need constant input, that strategic thinking is valuable and worth protecting. The calm millionaire also practices micro-detox during regular days. They don't check phones first thing in the morning. They protect the first hours for deep work without any digital input. They batch communications instead of responding in real time. They have large blocks of time where they're unreachable. This isn't being rude, it's being strategic. Because the people trying to reach you are generally bringing you their priorities, not serving yours. And if you're always available, you're always serving other people's priorities. Digital detox gives you back your attention so you can serve your own priorities. What you'll discover after consistent digital detox practice is that most of what feels urgent isn't. Most messages don't need immediate responses. Most news doesn't need immediate awareness. Most content doesn't need consumption at all. You've been operating under the assumption that staying connected is necessary. Digital detox proves it's not. It proves that disconnection creates better outcomes than constant connection. This realization is liberating, because you can stop pretending that your phone habits serve you. You can admit their addiction masquerading as productivity, and you can choose differently. The long-term practice is to make your default state less connected, to build your life so that being offline is normal and being online is the exception, to structure your work so that it doesn't require constant connectivity, to set expectations with others that you're not immediately responsive, to value strategic thinking time more than reactive availability time. This is how the calm millionaire operates. They're hard to reach not because they're important, because they're thinking. And thinking, protected from digital noise, is how they maintain the advantage that builds wealth. So commit to your first full digital detox day. Put it on your calendar. Tell anyone who needs to know. Then do it. Actually do it. Turn off the phone. Close the laptop. Spend the day thinking clearly. See what happens. Most people won't do this because they're scared of what they'll discover. Scared that without the noise, they'll have to face uncomfortable truths about their life or their choices. The calm millionaire faces these truths because facing them is how you change them. And changing them is how you build the life where wealth and peace coexist. The life that only becomes possible when you stop consuming and start thinking. Everything we've built so far leads to this question. What is wealth actually for? What are you measuring? What scoreboard are you checking? Because if you're using society's scoreboard, you're going to build society's version of success. And society's version is broken. It measures net worth but not life quality. It counts dollars but not meaning. It tracks assets but not fulfillment. The calm millionaire uses a different scoreboard, an inner scorecard that measures what actually determines whether your life was worth living. Most people never define this for themselves. They use the default metrics: income, net worth, house size, car quality, job title. These metrics are easy to communicate and easy to compare, so they become the standard. But none of them correlate strongly with life satisfaction. There are miserable people with all of these markers. There are fulfilled people with few of them. The external markers are terrible proxies for what actually matters. But we keep using them because we don't do the work of defining our own metrics. The inner scorecard requires you to ask harder questions. What would make you feel like your life was successful regardless of what anyone else thought? What would you want to be true about how you spent your time? What relationships would you want to have deepened? What would you want to have created or contributed? What experiences would you want to have had? What would you want people to say was true about your character? These questions don't have easy answers. They require thought. They require honesty. But answering them is how you build a scorecard that actually serves you. Here's what this looks like in practice. Someone on an external scorecard optimizes for visible success. They want the impressive job, the nice house, the enviable lifestyle. They make decisions based on how those decisions will be perceived. They choose the path that looks best from the outside. This creates a specific life, one where perception management is a major energy expenditure, where you're always aware of how you're being seen, where your choices are constrained by other people's opinions. This is exhausting, and it often leads to achieving everything on the external scorecard while feeling empty. Someone on an internal scorecard optimizes for different things. They want deep relationships, even if those relationships aren't with impressive people. They want meaningful work, even if that work isn't prestigious. They want time freedom, even if that means less income. They want to learn and grow, even if those lessons aren't credential-worthy. They're making decisions based on what actually matters to them, rather than what impresses others. This creates a completely different life, one where you're serving your values instead of managing perception, one where success is defined by you instead of inherited from culture. The calm millionaire operates on an internal scorecard. This doesn't mean they ignore money. Money is part of the scorecard. But it's not the whole scorecard. They've defined what amount of money is enough. What amount provides security, freedom, and options without requiring endless accumulation. Then they've defined the other metrics: time with family, quality of relationships, work that's meaningful, health and energy, learning and growth, contribution to others, peace of mind. These things are measured not by external validation, but by internal assessment. This creates a profound shift in decision-making. When you're operating on an external scorecard, you take the prestigious job even if it destroys your health. You buy the expensive house even if it constrains your freedom. You work excessive hours even if it damages relationships. Because the external scorecard rewards these choices. But when you're operating on an internal scorecard, you choose differently. You might take the less impressive job that gives you time. You might keep the modest house that preserves optionality. You might work less and earn less to protect what matters more. The external world might think you're underachieving. Your internal scorecard says you're winning. Let me give you specific questions to build your inner scorecard. If you had enough money to never worry about money again, how would you spend your time? Who would you spend it with? What would you create or contribute? What would be different about your life? The answers to these questions reveal your actual values, not your inherited values. Not your performed values, your real values. And your life should be optimized for those values, not for impressing people whose opinion doesn't actually matter to you. Another question. At the end of your life, what will you wish you had done more of? What will you regret not prioritizing? Will you wish you'd worked more hours? Probably not. Will you wish you'd made more money? Maybe, but probably only to the extent that money provides freedom. Will you wish you'd deepened relationships, spent more time on what matters, said no to things that don't, taken better care of your health, learned more, contributed more? Probably yes. So why aren't you structuring your life around these things now? Because you're using the wrong scorecard. The calm millionaire has done this work. They've defined success for themselves. They know what enough money looks like. They know what relationships matter. They know how they want to spend their time. They know what would make them feel fulfilled. And they've structured their entire life around these definitions, not around what looks good, around what is good by their own assessment. This makes them immune to comparison. Someone else's success doesn't threaten them because they're not competing on the same metrics. They're playing a different game entirely. This practice also makes them immune to the hedonic treadmill because they're not measuring success by acquisition. They're measuring it by alignment with values. Acquiring more doesn't change that measurement. Living more aligned does. So they're not chasing. They're aligning. And alignment doesn't require constantly more. It requires getting the fundamentals right and then protecting them. This is infinitely more sustainable than the chase for more. Here's what might surprise you. People on internal scorecards often build more financial wealth than people on external scorecards. Not because they're trying to, because they're not making the mistakes that external scorecard people make. They're not buying expensive houses to impress people, not working jobs they hate for titles, not spending on status signals, not making financial decisions for optics. They're keeping life cheap and focus clear. This creates surplus, and surplus invested patiently creates wealth, so they end up with both the internal satisfaction and the external markers. But they achieved it by ignoring the external markers and optimizing for internal satisfaction. This is the paradox. The people who don't care about impressing others often end up in positions that would impress others. The people who don't optimize for money often end up with more money. The people who don't chase status often end up with status, because they're not wasting energy on performance. They're concentrating energy on outcomes. And outcomes, achieved patiently through aligned action, produce everything the performers are chasing. The calm millionaire understands this. They're not trying to look successful. They're trying to be fulfilled. And being fulfilled while building wealth through patient strategy produces both internal satisfaction and external success. But in that order. Internal first. External is byproduct. So here's your work. Define your inner scorecard. Take a few hours. Sit with the hard questions. What actually matters to you? What would make your life feel successful? What would you want to be true regardless of external opinion? Write specific metrics, not vague ideas. Specific measures. How many deep friendships do you want? How much time freedom? What does enough money actually look like? What experiences matter? What contributions? What health markers? What learning goals? Build a dashboard that measures what actually determines your life quality. Then evaluate every decision against this dashboard, instead of against what looks good to others. Most people won't do this work. They'll keep using society's metrics because it's easier. They'll keep wondering why success feels empty even as they achieve more. They'll keep chasing external validation that never satisfies. The calm millionaire did the work. They defined success for themselves. They built the scorecard that actually measures what matters. And they've been winning on that scorecard for years while most people didn't even know the game existed. That's the inner scorecard. That's how you build wealth that serves life instead of life that serves wealth. We arrive now at the final principle, and it's the one that separates temporary wealth from generational impact. Legacy. Not the kind built with your name on buildings. The kind built with your values embedded in systems that outlive you. The calm millionaire thinks beyond their lifetime. They're building something that persists, not for ego, for continuity, for the preservation of what they've learned, for the extension of their impact beyond their years. Most people never think this way. They're optimizing for their own lifetime, building enough wealth to support themselves, maybe leaving something to their kids, but there's no larger architecture, no thought about what happens in 3 generations, no preservation of the principles that built the wealth, no mechanism to ensure the wealth serves rather than corrupts. So the wealth dissipates. The lessons are lost. The impact ends. 3 generations from wealth to ruin is the pattern. It doesn't have to be. The calm millionaire structures legacy differently. They're not just accumulating assets. They're embedding principles. They're creating documents that explain how the wealth was built. They're establishing structures that reinforce values. They're setting up systems that give future generations options without removing incentive. They're thinking about what wealth means across time rather than in a moment. This requires a completely different approach to wealth building. First, they document the philosophy. Why was the wealth built this way? What principles guided the decisions? What mistakes were made and what was learned? What should future generations know about money, about patience, about value creation? This isn't about ego. It's about knowledge transfer. Because wealth without wisdom is dangerous. Money in the hands of people who don't understand its proper use causes harm. So they write it down. They create a manual for future generations. Here's what we learned. Here's what worked. Here's what to avoid. Here's what money is for and what it isn't for. Second, they structure the wealth to reinforce values rather than undermine them. This is where most legacy planning fails. People leave money to their children with no structure. The money removes incentive. The children don't develop the capabilities that built the wealth. They consume rather than create. Within a generation or two, the wealth is gone, and the family has lost the characteristics that made them successful. The calm millionaire prevents this. They structure distributions to encourage capability development. They create incentives for education, for building their own ventures, for contribution. They give resources, but not so many that struggle becomes unnecessary. Because struggle is where capability develops. Third, they involve future generations in the wealth while they're still alive. They teach them. They explain the principles. They involve them in decisions. They model the behavior they want replicated. They don't wait until death to transfer everything at once with no context. They transfer gradually, with teaching, with mentorship, with a chance to ask questions and learn from someone who actually built the wealth. This creates continuity. The next generation doesn't just inherit assets. They inherit understanding, and understanding is what preserves wealth across generations. Fourth, they set up structures that last, trusts that can't be depleted in one generation, foundations that fund causes they care about perpetually, businesses that provide income for multiple generations, assets that appreciate over time rather than depreciate. They're not thinking about what provides maximum consumption now. They're thinking about what provides sustained benefit across time. This requires patience and it requires thinking beyond yourself. But it's how wealth becomes generational rather than temporary. Fifth, they define what the wealth is for. Not just for comfortable living, for creating options, for taking risks that employed people can't take, for starting businesses, for supporting art or research or causes, for providing security so that future generations can take the chances that create impact. Wealth properly structured is a platform for capability and contribution. It removes the survival fear that keeps most people trapped in safe choices. It creates the possibility of courage. The calm millionaire preserves this possibility by being explicit about what the wealth should enable. Here's what this looks like practically. You build significant wealth through the principles we've discussed. You could spend it all on yourself. You could leave it to your children with no structure. But instead, you create a plan. You write a document explaining your philosophy. You set up structures that preserve capital while providing income. You establish educational trusts that fund learning but not consumption. You create incentive systems that reward capability development. You involve your children in philanthropy so they learn generosity. You teach them about investing, about business, about the principles that built what they're inheriting. You model the behavior you want to see. And you structure everything so that 3 generations from now, your great-grandchildren still have the platform that wealth provides. Not because you were attached to dynasty building, because you understood that wealth properly preserved can do good across time. But legacy building requires confronting mortality. Most people avoid this. They don't want to think about death, so they don't plan for it. They leave everything unclear. Their estate becomes a burden rather than a gift. The calm millionaire faces mortality directly. They know they're going to die. They accept it. And they plan for what happens after. Not with anxiety, with intention. They see death as a transition that should be handled well, rather than a catastrophe to be avoided in planning. This clarity makes legacy possible. There's also legacy in what you don't leave. The calm millionaire often chooses not to leave everything to children. They leave enough to provide options, but not so much that work becomes optional. They leave significant wealth to causes they care about, to foundations, to charities, to impact that extends beyond bloodline. This decision is controversial, but it's often wise, because unlimited wealth corrupts most people. But limited wealth with good structure and teaching creates capability and gratitude. The calm millionaire is more interested in raising capable humans than wealthy humans, so they structure accordingly. The 100-year game is about thinking beyond your life, about recognizing that you're a link in a chain, that what you build can either strengthen the chain or weaken it, that your choices about wealth will affect people who aren't born yet. This level of thinking is rare. Most people are trapped in quarterly thinking. The calm millionaire escaped to decade thinking, then century thinking. They're making choices today that they won't see the full results of. They're planting trees whose shade they'll never sit under, because they understand that this is what legacy actually means. Impact that extends beyond you, value that persists after you, principles that guide people you'll never meet. So here's your final practice. Write a letter to your great-grandchild. Explain what you built and why. Explain what money is for and what it isn't. Explain what you learned about wealth, about patience, about what matters. Explain what you hope they'll do with what you're leaving behind. Be specific, be honest. Include the failures and what you learned from them. This letter forces you to think across generations, to clarify your philosophy, to consider what deserves preservation. Most people will never write this letter because they've never thought about legacy this way. The calm millionaire writes it, updates it, uses it to guide present decisions. Because if you know what you want to be true in 3 generations, you know what to do today. That's the 100-year game. That's legacy building. That's how wealth becomes something larger than personal comfort. It becomes a tool that extends your values and your impact far beyond your years. We've covered everything, from the invisible millionaire principle to legacy building across centuries. Every piece builds on the last. Every principle reinforces the others, but none of it matters unless you actually do it. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people live permanently. They read, they understand, they agree, and then they do nothing. They go back to the patterns that weren't working. They resume the noise. They abandon the patience. They skip the hard parts, and then they wonder why nothing changed. The calm millionaire is different, not because they're special, because they execute. They take the principles and implement them immediately. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't delay until they have more information. They start. They build the systems. They protect the attention. They practice the silence. They structure the patience. They create the scoreboard. They do the work. And the work, done consistently over years, compounds into outcomes that seem impossible to people who only read about it. So here's what happens next. You have 2 paths. Path 1, you go back to what you were doing. You found these ideas interesting, but you don't implement them. You keep trading time for money. You keep reacting to noise. You keep consuming instead of building. You keep using society's scorecard. You keep being busy without progressing. 5 years from now, you're in the same position wondering why. 10 years from now, you've worked harder than the calm millionaire, but have less to show for it. This path is well worn. Most people take it. It's comfortable until you realize the cost. Path 2, you implement immediately. Today, not tomorrow, today. You define your highest priority outcome. You eliminate the noise that's preventing progress toward it. You start building the first system. You practice the pause in your next negotiation. You schedule your first digital detox day. You draft your inner scorecard. You commit to patience on something that's been testing you. You begin, not perfectly, not comprehensively, but you begin. And beginning creates momentum. Small actions compound. The first 90 days are hard. You're fighting conditioning. You're building new patterns. You're tolerating discomfort. But then something shifts. The patterns start to feel natural. The outcomes start to appear. You see evidence that this works. And that evidence makes continuing easier. 5 years on this path, you're unrecognizable. You've built systems that generate wealth without your constant input. You've developed relationships that create opportunities you never had to chase. You've protected your attention so rigorously that your decision-making quality is exceptional. You've practiced patience long enough that your investments have compounded significantly. You've built a life where wealth and peace coexist. You're operating on your own scorecard and winning by your own measures. 10 years on this path, you've achieved what most people will never believe was possible. Not because you're brilliant, because you were patient, because you were consistent, because you chose the hard path that most people avoid, because you became the calm millionaire. The question isn't whether this works. The question is whether you'll do it, whether you'll tolerate the discomfort of changing, whether you'll prioritize long-term compound over short-term comfort. Whether you'll trust the principles enough to execute them when execution feels wrong. Whether you'll stay patient when patience feels like inaction. Whether you'll stay silent when speaking feels necessary. Whether you'll protect your attention when accessibility feels required. Whether you'll build systems when active income feels safer. Whether you'll measure yourself by your own scorecard when external validation is easier. Your answer to these questions determines your next decade, not your intelligence, not your resources, not your network, your willingness to execute what you now know. Most people know what to do. Very few people do what they know. The calm millionaire is in the second group. They execute, they persist, they compound, and the compound produces everything else. You're at the end of this book, but the beginning of everything that matters. The information is complete. The framework is clear. The practices are defined. What remains is your decision. Will you go back to the patterns that weren't working? Or will you implement what you just learned? Will you be patient enough to see it through? Will you be quiet enough to hear what matters? Will you be strategic enough to build what lasts? The world will keep screaming. The noise will keep coming. The demands will keep arriving. The temptations to abandon patience will keep appearing. Most people will keep performing wealth while barely building it. Most people will keep busy while going nowhere. Most people will keep optimizing for the wrong metrics and wondering why success feels hollow. You don't have to be most people. You can be the calm millionaire, the person who built wealth through strategic invisibility, who made better decisions through protected attention, who negotiated better terms through disciplined silence, who created freedom through system building, who weathered volatility through anti-fragile structure, who built real relationships instead of transactional networks, who preserved energy through calculated refusal, who leveraged time through patient execution, who kept life simple while profits compounded, who stayed clear through digital disconnection, who measured success by internal metrics, who built legacy through generational thinking. This person exists. They're operating right now. They're not louder than you. They're quieter. They're not busier than you. They're more focused. They're not luckier than you. They're more patient. They're not smarter than you. They're more disciplined. They're not special. They just made different choices. Better choices. Choices that compound. You can make those choices too. Starting now. Not tomorrow. Now. Turn off the noise. Define the priority. Build the first system. Practice the pause. Schedule the detox. Write the scorecard. Commit to patience. Begin. The world will not make this easy. The world is designed to prevent exactly what you're about to do, but the world doesn't determine your outcome. Your choices do. Your consistency does. Your patience does, so choose. Choose calm over chaos. Choose systems over hustle. Choose silence over noise. Choose patience over panic. Choose simplicity over complexity. Choose internal metrics over external validation. Choose to build something that lasts. Choose to become the calm millionaire. Not the person who read about it, the person who did it. Your competitors won't see you coming. By the time they do, you'll be unreachable. Not because you shouted louder, because you moved smarter while they performed. Welcome to Calm Power, the quiet path, the patient path, the path that actually works, the path that's waiting for you to take the first step. Take it now.